I'm feeling a tremendous amount of joy and feeling very grateful to have the opportunity to be sitting in this space today with Amanda Tweed. Amanda, thank you so much for taking this time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Certainly, certainly. I've had an opportunity to read a little bit about you, and I found what I read to be very, very interesting and compelling. And ultimately, that is why I reached out. And for me, what I love doing is I don't necessarily want to try to read too much about people, as I really enjoy hearing from people about their
Mm.
journeys in their own words. So, what I thought I would do to start out the conversation, if I could ask you what your journey and the inner work that you have done and are doing, what that all means to you at a deeper level.
Okay, so if I start from, well, if I give an overall picture as growing up as a child, I was always
Sure.
extremely intuitive, and there was a knowing of how the mind works because I have a memory of I think it was 1972, so I would have been about 3, 4 years old. I know I couldn't write, and my grandmother had a telephone, and I was very close to my grandmother, so I was asking my dad for her telephone number because it was rare back in the 70s to have a phone in your home in the UK.
Huh.
And I just remember I kept asking my dad over and over, and he was so patient. He kept repeating the digits. And I remember it clearly. I had the intuitive thought, why do I keep asking? How is he remaining patient? But this is how it's supposed to be. I just remember having that utterance. And so dad must have maybe told me my grandmother's number, I don't know, maybe about 50 times. And then I just intuitively stopped. That night when I went to bed, my dad was involved in an accident, and my mum had to phone my grandmother to let her know. And so she woke me up. And I actually remember being woken up half awake, half asleep, and I just read the number out to her. And yeah, so that there was just that intuitive knowing that the mind works on repetition. It just works on repetition. That is the function of the mind. Um, Growing up, I always knew that I'm not going to say there was something special about me, but I just knew that I was different. I couldn't really join in with people that were, being mean to other people. It just didn't feel right. And so I kind of became a crutch for people that were vulnerable, that had deep secrets in their soul, and I just knew that you don't repeat this. I just had this knowing that but I never became an empath. I didn't carry other people's stories off. It's as if it was just an empty open space. They would offload the pain in their heart, and then it was forgotten, and then we would just
Mm.
move on. So that's been the major part of the path. And then in 1996, I'd made a decision, and it wasn't a very good decision, or at least I didn't think it was, and I ended up stealing some money from an employer. The consequence of that was going to prison. But even through that process, the police officers, the criminal justice system, they were saying, like, we don't want to send you to prison because you took the money and you bought vulnerable people things. You like played the Robin Hood. Your motive's right, but the way
Yeah.
that you did it wasn't right, Amanda. And so I got the minimum sentence, and they didn't confiscate anything. And then, of course, that opened the door to meeting different people. And I met an abusive partner. I think I was in my late 20s. Prior to that offence, I never had any challenges with alcohol or drugs. I was a very happy person. I always liked to dance and sing, and, life was really effortless. I never had to work hard. Um, if I just back up, I remember my auntie told me when I was born, she said, you was born dancing. Whenever music came on, your little body would be moving in the cart. And she said you would move on time to the music. It's as if you was born with musical intelligence. And so I mean, my parents were amazing. I say were, they still are. And my dad got me involved in so many things. He took me to have typing lessons. He took me to do judo. I remember having music lessons, and I just loved all of them. And he just took me to all of these different activities. And then he never took me to learn any dancing because I cannot, I've already got that in me. And he didn't, I don't know, I suppose I didn't think it needed developing. So many years later, we've moved from one area to another in the city, within the same city. And there was a young girl, and we become really friendly. And she was a dancer, but she'd gone to have dance lessons. And so she joined a dance school and asked me to join her there. And I said, yeah, I'll meet you there. And I went to meet her on a Saturday morning and she didn't show up.
Mm.
I now know later what happened. She got caught up with her grandma, but she didn't show up. And the owners of the dance school, oh, sorry about that, a telephone call.
Oh, I can definitely can see it, hear you now. There was just a kind of a momentary, yeah, kind of a momentary lapse there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So that's okay. So the owners of the dance school, they they asked me who I was and why am I there, and I told them I'm waiting for my friend. They said that's absolutely fine. You can sit and wait here in this area. So I did, and we never had mobile phones back then, so I couldn't text her or phone her and ask her, what was happening. An hour or so went past, and the owners came out, and they just spontaneously said, "Would you like a job?" And I said, "Yeah." I think I was 16 at the time. I said, "Yeah." And
Oh,
I just
wow.
thought it must be cleaning or something. They had a little cafeteria. I thought maybe it's to serve coffee. And they said, okay, come with us. And they led me to a smaller dance studio, brought a dancer in and said, teach her to dance, and walked out. I was like, what is going on? So I didn't have any knowledge of disco dancing, but I did understand music and the beats of music. And so that's what I just did with her. I said, right, you could do that a little bit different. Here's the beat. If you could alter the step, and then I was very fortunate that some disco dancers that had gone on to do competitions all over the world. They were world champion status, and they came and joined the dance studio. And one of them just said, I've just got to help you develop your gift. And so, free of charge, he taught me everything I knew about dancing. Then I went into human anatomy and physiology of the body, and then I became a professional dance teacher. So that was how my life, it just unfolded. There was never any pre-planning. It was just like, oh, here's another thing that's happening. I'll join in with that. And that was kind of the pattern. A lot of people said, oh, it's hard to get work and so forth. And I just found it was just so effortless. And so that was my life prior to making that decision to commit fraud. And then, of course, my life went downhill from prison when I met this guy. He'd become quite abusive and he'd done heroin and crack cocaine. And, the abuse continued. And he said, take this drug. And I said, no, no, I've never took drugs. I'm not about to. My life was very happy, very, even in prison, I just found it a fantastic. I mean, I know this probably sounds crazy, but I love meeting people in different capacities. And I just get on with everyone. Um, and so the abuse started, and then I was forced to take heroin. He didn't use any needles, but he did use foil because you can take heroin via foil. And as
Mm.
soon as I took that heroin, I was instantly, when I say it, I've never known something so instant, immediately, because heroin, it clouds your judgments, but it makes you feel very floaty and very, I can see why people take it to get rid of problems, because the problems disappear. All the abuse, everything that he'd said had gone out of the window. And it's like a feeling of false love. It's a false, oh, everything's okay, but because it's obviously done by the heroin. So now the fear of heroin has gone. And then it kind of snowballed from there. And then in came crack cocaine. And then with that lifestyle, um, the easiest option for me at that time was shoplifting, because I'd seen it as impersonal. I'm not hurting nobody. I'm just going into a shop, taking some stuff, and I justified it to myself. I'm helping people to pay less for goods. That's what I did. And that continued. And then in 2002, um, I was in the middle of addiction in the drugs world, really chaotic lifestyle. And from nowhere, from absolutely nowhere, this vision, it I do my hand like that because it's as if it just came and hit me in the face. And I just saw a future version of myself with a very loving partner and two little children. And I didn't know if these two little children were my children or if they were going to be my grandchildren because I've got a son. But I didn't question it. I didn't believe it. And I didn't not, it was just, I just enjoyed it. I was like, oh my God, this is gorgeous. Oh,
Mm.
this is amazing. This is freedom. And I think because I didn't fight addiction, I kind of surrendered to it. I had this utterance that I want the truth. I just want the truth. I don't know what that means. I just want the truth. And I cannot accept this as reality. I just couldn't because my life was nothing to do with drugs at all. And then all of a sudden, I'm this, big drug addict. I said, I can't accept this. I'm not fighting it, but it doesn't feel real. So I was kind of going along with emotions, facing homelessness. There were bouts of mental health, but there was still a presence behind it all. I didn't understand.
Yeah, I love that. I
Yeah,
love it.
I was like, well, but there was no identification. I didn't identify with the presence and I didn't identify with the mental health. It was like I don't know, sort of like watching the body go through all of this. But when that vision had come, as soon as the vision had come, there was like a spontaneous self-reflective moment where I was saying, well, I'd love to change the past. Oh God, now I've seen that vision, I would love, but can I change the past? No. What don't I like about the past? So I'd started to go into some sort of self-reflection and I would remember an incident and I would say, what would that look like if I could change it? So I just imagined a TV screen and a remote control and me looking at myself. And then I said, you know what? I wouldn't change any of it because each event led to the other. And I've met some fantastic people. Um, but then the addiction, the world of the addiction become like 10 times louder. I mean, I understand why now, because when we stretch, when the consciousness is stretched, if we go below that stretch, it's a very dense lack and limitation. So there was a lot of anger and frustration. And then in 2010, I'd gone to prison and I just had this sense that this is the last time. I don't know what this means, but this is the last time. And I didn't know if that meant I was going to die. I had no idea, but I just knew there was a sense this is the last time. And during that prison sentence, there was a drought, a heroin drought was on. So there was no drugs coming into the prison, but the detoxing was still happening. And there was this lady, and to this day, nobody knows what she was doing in prison. We don't even know what crime she committed, but she was a Christian and she didn't look like somebody who'd committed a crime. It was like, what is she doing here? Um, I mean, I later found out she did later, tell me, but she she moved in two doors down from where I was on the house block. And she was very polite. And I kept looking at her and I said, that woman's very powerful. There's something about that woman. And I just knew that she was a Christian. She didn't tell me, I just knew. I said, there's something very powerful about that woman, the way that she walks with such an authority. And when I was leaving, the day that I was leaving the prison, she came in and she'd shown me nothing but love throughout the whole of that prison sentence. But I was having my hair styled and some of my hair had gone onto the floor. And I saw her looking at the hair, but because clairvoyancy had come through this body, I knew, I just very intuitive, I knew that you can use hair as a contact point to pray for somebody. I knew that. So I knew, and I just knew, I said, this woman hasn't got it in her to hurt me. She can't hurt anybody. And I don't think that I can be hurt. There was like a protection. I just had this knowing. Um, and as I was leaving, she laid her hands on me and she whispered, and I heard her pray in tongues. I'd had a dream when I was 16 and I was talking in tongues in my dream. And I didn't know it was called tongues. But when I heard her, I said, that's that language from the dream. Because I'd seen Jesus in my dream. I didn't know who he was. And
Yeah.
and as soon as she touched me, I remembered, I said, that's tongues. And I got on the train. And normally, when I came out of the prison, Normally, you enter into another prison, the prison of homelessness, the prison of addiction, the prison of crime. And I was waiting for my palms to start sweating, and they wasn't sweating, and there was no anxiety. I was like, what's happening? Where's the addiction gone? What's going on? And I couldn't accept that. So I superimposed and went out and bought some drugs. And I said, that's it, I've had enough. I'm checking out of this world. So I done loads of drugs. I drank some Irish whiskey, but then I woke up the next day. Um, and when I woke up the next day, I'd stayed over at a friend's house. Um, I just knew I had to come out of the house. I just knew there was a he had another friend who'd offered me some heroin, and I wanted to say yes, but out of my mouth came no. And I thought that wasn't me talking. I didn't say no. And then I physically felt a force turn me, and I was like, I need to go. I've got to get out. I don't know what this means. I've got to go. And I was referred from the prison to a supported accommodation type hostel. And when I went there, there was an awakened being waiting for me. I get so emotional when I
Yeah.
think about her. Yeah, she was a
Yeah.
Christian lady and she was fully awakened. Um, and she became my mentor. Um, but prior to that, when I'd got there, I mean, I didn't know she was an awakened being. I could feel power. I thought, this is that power's there again. It's that power again. I didn't know what it was called. And I went to bed that night. And usually, when you wake up the next day after doing drugs, your body is aching. But I woke up in Christ consciousness, but I didn't know it was called that. It was just a state of blissful isness, happiness, knowing that I am that I am. There was just this knowing. So there was no spiritual seeking. There was no, it just happened. And it was my mentor, having that woman that could confirm that that is self-realization. And I just then fell in love with Jesus. There was just like this, my heart just burst open. And I had a very profound and strong faith walk with Jesus. My prayer life was never what can I get. It was more like thank you, thank you, thank you. And with that thank you, everything came. I think I did. Well, the one thing I did ask for, I said, oh, have I got a husband? Because I knew that my choice of men in the past wasn't very good. And I heard a massive amen, amen. And I said, that's it. And then 3 months later, um, a man walked into my life and I wasn't expecting it at all. And
That's great. Yeah.
yeah, he'd seen me and he'd already made the decision. That's the woman for me. He just had this connection. And then he came back a few months later um, with some colleagues. And that's it from that day. I mean, that was 13 years ago. We've been together ever since. So it's just phenomenal. The walk, yeah, it was a miraculous walk and it led me to, in 2016, it was like, who am I and who are you? Jesus, who are you? Because you can't pin him down. You can't. He's forever. He's never changing. But there was always another surprise and like another surprise. And then my mentor spontaneously sent me a video of Muji. My head,
Yes.
my
Yes.
head went straight in the lion's mouth because Muji's video was he was doing a self-inquiry and it was who is
Yeah.
God? Who is God? Is God here? And I was like, there's no God, there's no I, there's no sufferer. And it was just complete and utter silence. And I felt like one of Jesus's disciples when he said, I'll go away for a little while, but I'll send the helper, the Holy Spirit, because it was very like, I know that Jesus is real. I know he's real. He's not just a real experience, there's a real presence. It's omniscience, it's omnipotent. I can feel it. And then to realize that you are that also, because that is what he said, I'm the tree, you're the branch. So um, the last 6 years have been marrying the two together, the realizing who we are, the true nature of who we are, and also the teachings of Jesus have just really taken over this body. They've just become so, they're embodied, they're so profound. Um, and it's a very peaceful walk. It's just recognizing who and what we are, and walking from there, knowing that we are all the power that there is, all the omniscience that there is, and all the presence that there is, and it's a unified field of consciousness. So that's the
Yeah,
journey.
that is so beautiful. I'm so incredibly grateful that you have that for all of this that you have shared, and it is so it is so nourishing and meaningful. I wanted to ask you one of the things that was speaking to me. Many things that you've said have been speaking to me beyond the words that you've been saying. But
Yeah.
I found it very meaningful when you spoke about in the midst of the addiction, this surrendering. And as soon as I heard you say that, it brought up a memory of one of my early teachers who spoke of, he would always say that it is impossible to change the mind with the mind. And he was speaking in context of
Yes.
surrendering and finally recognizing our true nature and who we really
Yes.
are. So I was wondering if that was really the beginning of this transformation for you.
I think it was because when I looked back, so in 2011, the I mean, I've heard people say, "Oh, Amanda, you had a Kundalini." Is that what it's called, a
Oh,
Kundalini awakening?
yes. Uh-huh.
And
Yes.
I say, well, the Kundalini awakening is a big shift. This wasn't a shift. This was just waking up. It wasn't a case of all the drug addicts gone. There was no memory whatsoever, none. It was the death of the self-image of Amanda. It would just died, and it was, oh, this is the natural state. Yeah, this is it. So there was no energy shift. The happiness, you could tell, was inherent. It wasn't a state of consciousness, it was inherent. um and I forgot what question you've asked. Sorry, Jeff. Sorry, you asked
Oh,
a
that's
question.
okay. I was just speaking about, I just found it very interesting that you spoke about, the surrender and
Oh yeah.
I do recognize as human beings, I do have respect for what people do in terms of trying to change habits and self-improvement. I've never had much luck doing that, I can say. But I think I was sort of not dragged into it, but it finally was out of an exhaustion,
Yes.
that surrender, and that's why when you said that, that really spoke to me, that I
Yes.
got this sense that there was really that was somehow related to the beginning of this recognition of who you are.
Yes. Do you know what, Jeff? If looking back on reflection, there was a lot of surrendering on my path because a lot of things I didn't understand, so I didn't fight them, and I've always had that level of equality. There was never really a hierarchy or superiority or inferiority. It was always like, okay. I mean, growing up, there was um, there was many different fashions in the 70s. So there was the Rastafarian, there was the mods, there was the skinheads,
Yeah.
and there was the Rudies, and I liked all of them. And I was like, I like all of them, so I'm going to be each one every day. I don't have to choose. I don't
Ah,
have,
yeah.
I don't have to separate it. So Monday I would be a mod, Tuesday I would be a Rastafarian. Obviously, I didn't grow the dreadlocks. I just followed the music and the clothes. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of surrendering to what is and looking at what's in front of you and said, oh, I can choose all of them, or I can. And then going through the prison, the police system, the police used to be on their knees. They would say, how are you so nice? Like, why are you not fighting us? And I said, because there's no point. So the cell door would lock, and I'd hear people throwing their cups of coffee and screaming. And I'd think,
Mm.
what? You can't get out. Why don't you just stop? I just never understood fighting life. It doesn't mean that you roll over and you become apathetic. It's more wisdom to say, well, okay, I'm in this room. I'm here for the rest of the day or however many hours. I may not like it, but what is kicking a metal door? What am I going to achieve? Probably a broken toe. Thank you, no, thank you. And that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's that. I find that so interesting, and I was going to ask you as well. I know that what you're speaking of, and I think as I was reading about you about, and I've heard this phrase, and it's something that really does resonate with me of direct experience. And I
yes,
know that there are, and when you were also speaking about there, if I understood you correctly, that there was no need on your part to, as far as any spiritual seeking. I myself started on this path decades ago, doing a
yes,
lot of seeking and just wore myself out. And I've met so many people over the years that have done that until I think the phrase is that you exhaust the seeker. At some point, you finally surrender and recognize what's been there all along.
yes, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It's surrendering is it's so easy from here. Just drop. Um, I remember my mentor said to me, she said, "You've got." I don't think she called it a personality. She said, "There's something so very dangerous about the way that you function, Amanda." She said, "It can go up there or it can go down there. Your character is all or nothing." She said, "It is
yeah.
all or nothing. There's no compromising," which I suppose I haven't had any grey areas. And I think that's come through with the surrender. I've always said, drop it. What's the worst you can do? Can this thing, can this thing stop existence? No, so let it be. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, and you absolutely made my day when you mentioned Muji. I actually came across him actually 20 early 2011, and I was going to mention to you that one of the things I have loved about him immediately and always have, and it's always resonated with me, is his unwavering willingness and strength to help people. And sometimes to the point of actually, and I recognize I've watched, many of his gatherings where it's almost as if there is this, not an impatience, but it is just that it's that love that he has for people that he wants so badly for people to recognize their true nature.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
And do you know, Muji, I was listening to one of his teachings. I don't know because I don't go looking for teachings. I'll speak with Jesus. I mean, because someone said, if you're self-realized, why do you speak to Jesus? I say, because it is one of the best ways to express love. When you've been a
yeah,
devotee, it's having that, mm, it's asking for wisdom. It gives birth to humility. So asking for wisdom. Yes, I've got lots of information, but I say, Jesus, wisdom. And you instantly, before the M has been pronounced, the information's there. And I remember having a notification from YouTube and I watched it and it was Muji. And he was then talking about the devotee. He was saying, to really understand this path, you don't have to have a devotee, but that is the ground. It is the ground. It's as if you are able to follow a master attentively. And I think a lot of the great masters all came from devotees, Yogananda and some of the masters that are alive today. They all had that level of devotee. But then there is a time when you realize that the purpose of devotee was to get the heart center love, so that the devotee, even though the master knows that there is no separation, it's the oneness, it's that love, it's the heart opening, and it also gives birth to humility and grace. And I think that is why, because it's so easy, you really want someone to get it. And I think that's what I see in Muji. It's like, this is so simple. This is so simple. It really is simple. Yeah.
I love that. It's
Yeah.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. For
Mm.
some reason, early this morning, when I was reflecting on having this conversation with you, and there wasn't any, I can truly say there wasn't any rational thought or trying to think about it. But what is
Mm.
really interesting to me is that the phrase just kind of came up intuitively when I was kind of thinking about my day and speaking
Mm.
with you. That all of a sudden I had this. Uh, I don't even know really what to call it. Just this notion that it was really phrased as a question. Who are we? Who are we without our minds, without
Yeah.
our identities, without our any beliefs about who we are and what we're doing?
Yes, yes. And that is something that I actually teach now because it's just become so obvious. Um, is I when I had a mentor, because she was also, I mean, she was a Christian. She'd done a lot of work around Lester Levingston and different masters, and she'd understood Bob Proctor's science of thinking, because I said, I want to know what happened because the mind wasn't there. This body went to sleep as an addict, as homeless, as somebody who'd done drugs, who said they were going to take their own life, had done all these things. And when the eyes opened in this body, Christ consciousness, what the hell happened? Where was the mind? What is this mind that I gave so much importance to? And the mind is a functioning, and the consciousness, I often use the analogy, we are the ocean. We are the boundless, ageless, timeless, impersonal, ever present ocean. That's who we are. That is the attributeless, timeless self. And then there's a fountain, like a fountain within that ocean. That is the
Yeah.
consciousness. It's also the consciousness, but it can get colored with frequencies and energies and it dances. That's the changing realm. So we are the never changing. When we have a sense of separation and we've become the mind, we've become the thinker, we believe, we have the capacity to believe concepts and have doubts. That one is the body mind of Amanda. When that one recognizes, oh, I'm not the fountain, I'm the ocean, the fountain stops functioning as a separate self and recognizes, I am that. And it's the peeling away of all the noise. It's letting go of the investment in being that separate fountain. It's then, okay, so I mean, there's a way that I do it. It is all constructs of concepts. It's just looking at the constructs, putting them under self inquiry. Now you've smashed all of those beliefs. Now let go of the energy that you invested in, bit by logical bit. It doesn't take very long, actually, but it's more of recognizing your true nature, ageless, timeless, impersonal, ever present being.
Yes, that is. I thank you so much for sharing that because that really does. That really speaks to me. And I was thinking about. I have met a few people over the years and had conversations with people who have had this kind of realization without doing a lot of spiritual seeking, and it brings to mind, or even to my heart, the question of recognizing that, I guess I've heard the phrase before, chasing enlightenment, and I know for myself it was, decades of when, someday when I finally get enlightened, when I had this idea of what it was going to be like to finally really know who I really was, and only to recognize that that was all just time and energy that was spent. And I've heard a teacher before, speak of the fact that we are enlightened already. We always have been, but and then again, it makes me wonder, is some of that seeking with some people that is just part of their journey or their karma, you might say, and that's
Yeah,
just part of what with the walk the walk that occurs.
yes, life is patterning, shaping, and forming all the time, and there are lots of different concepts, and I recognize and respect every single one of them because everything is okay. Because you cannot not be the ocean. It's to say that a wave takes a different shape to a fountain, which takes a different shape to water crashing against rocks. It's all water. It's just consciousness having vast experiences, all from the one ocean. But yes, there is definitely some scarers because the way that the mind functions, the mind is a machine, um, and we don't actually have to function from the mind. We can lay it down. We don't need it. We can just move from omniscience. So
Yeah.
when we just focus on who and what we are, and know the nature of that, know the nature of consciousness, conscious of being conscious. Um, I met with David Bingham, I think it was 2 years ago.
Hmm.
And during a
Yeah.
conversation with David, he said, "Oh, are you aware of the Indian concepts of the koshas?" And I hadn't heard of them. I said, "No, I've not heard of them, David, because I hadn't
Yeah.
done any seeking. I hadn't seeked anything, chakras and there's nothing wrong with them. But I've just never picked them up."
I
And
love this.
yeah,
Yeah.
and he said, "Oh, it sounds as though the koshas have come through automatically for you." So then I I mean, I still speak with David. We stay in touch, but I went and done some research on the koshas, and I was like, oh, so is that called the bliss filter? Is that when I'm just being myself and when I'm dancing? Oh,
Yeah.
and the wisdom body. But then there was a predominance in the mental body. There was a strong predominance, which creates a false self image. It just creates it. And it's a very subtle sheath that goes over the consciousness. Um,
Yeah.
and it's as if there is a past, but when you go to self inquiry and say, is there a past? You're met with silence. You're met with a loving silence. So you know there's not a past, but there's still a sense of investment in a person who has a past. And then that's when I just reclaim the power, rewind the script, and the thing falls away.
Wow, that is beautiful. That is incredibly beautiful. And it's interesting when you were talking about the koshas, and it was making me think of I over the years exploring many Hindu teachings and Buddhist teachings, and I know there's all kind and have also not that and none of this matters because it's all really at the end of the day I honor all of it and I do honor these traditions, but it really does make me wonder if it's almost like as humans instead that I realize we can have this experience you speak of, but I wonder if as humans sometimes that we have to turn this into concepts and we have I don't want to say have to, but
Yeah,
there is this the mind doing what it does. And so at
yeah,
some point, and there again I have very much tremendous respect and love for all of these various traditions, but at the
yes,
same time I get a sense that we can lead ourselves further away. It's
yes,
almost like in a way, I wonder if these are just descriptions of what ultimately we all are. But but as humans, I don't necessarily feel like it was intended for that. But I wonder as humans, that's the mind, wanting to study all of these things to try
yeah,
to. It's almost like trying to what's the word I'm trying to use here? It's like solving a puzzle, so to speak, or using a map to try
yeah.
to get to this destination that we believe that we ultimately can get to if we try and do this.
Yes, yes. The mind will, when the once the mind has created a self-image, it wants to put God in that so it can have what it wants. But you turn that around. It's to I always point people to the at the top, just be attributeless. And we can use the koshas then as a function so we can rest back. I mean, David Bingham often talks about effortless being, um, where he mentions, you recognize your true nature, it's attributeless, and then to play the game, just rest in the wisdom filter. And every so often you get rushes of bliss. And then the mind then becomes the machine, what it was designed to do, which is structure and organize. If you want to bake a cake or you want to do something, you just use the mind. You use it as a dualistic tool because, yeah, flour is separate from butter. So, but it's just done in a
Yeah.
very playful way. There's no seriousness. But the mind is a fantastic machine. I think I might write a book on the mind actually, because I think if people understand that it's a machine and not who we are, and it
Yes.
cannot lead us to self realization, we do have to lay it down. We don't lose it, we can function through it because it's always about the state of consciousness. That's the thing. What is the state of consciousness? Is consciousness predominantly identified with the mind? Then the state of consciousness is dualistic. What is the state of it? Because consciousness is attributeless. It's just like water. Water is water and its nature is wet, but that water can be made into ice. It can also be made into steam. So, what is the state of the consciousness?
Yeah.
And then it's to put that under self inquiry and come back to who and what we are because it takes no effort, it takes no time, it takes no effort. And then it's to recognize that you are the attributeless, timeless, boundless, spacious, omnipresence, omnipotent, powerful awareness, being aware of itself.
Yeah, there's so much joy there. There really is. And I love how you were speaking about in terms of the mind and it being a machine. Uh,
Yes.
as after years of practicing mindfulness and Zen, I don't necessarily formally do that anymore, but what I have found is that this witnessing or paying attention, that consciousness or consciousness being behind the mind. And there again, I don't know if behind, in front of, at some point, I guess it doesn't even, I guess it's just a human explanation. But there is this sense that I've had of just this getting lost in it and then
Yeah,
realizing I'm lost in the mind. And
yeah,
it's almost like it is that associative machine. I can just somehow remember one thing, and then suddenly there's this witnessing of it bringing to mind other things. And then pretty
yeah,
soon I am really lost
yeah,
somewhere in my mind, following all of these things,
yes,
only to come back here and remember, oh, okay, this is, yeah, it's just that
yeah,
that returning over and over and over and over again.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you can switch the mind off. It's like a sideshow. You can literally switch it off. Yeah. It's like
Yeah,
I love again, I mean, I always bring it back to David, and I love the way that he explains because it sort of married the information that I had on the mind. So I use the science of thinking, looking at the conscious mind, looking at the subconscious programs and how it functions. So the conscious mind is aware of its environment. If it's unconscious to the true nature, then the outside environment goes into the subconscious. Then there are beliefs, there are habits, and there are behaviors, and that is the state of consciousness. And David, what David says, because I know that he has done some form of work, personal development prior to self-realization. He says unplug from that part of the mind, just unplug, pull the plug out, and just go to the top
yeah,
stage and function from there. You don't see, we've been told there's lots of karma, I mean, the subconscious programming is where we wasn't conscious and we invested in the dualistic mind. So it's to identify that and then reclaim your power. That's where people say they experience shifts and Kundalini awakening because you are saying, no, that thing there, it's not true. I've put it
yeah.
to self inquiry, it's not true. But where did I invest? Oh, yes, I used to love getting angry at other drivers, for example. So it's that it's
That's great.
understanding, yeah, it's understanding our sovereignty, our omniscience, because what I've come to realize is within omniscience are six faculties. Three of them are authority and three are power. And
Mm,
the three that are authority is perception, memory, and imagination. Jeff, there is no human being, not even God himself, can change the way that I see something. There is nobody that
yeah,
can make me perceive something the way that I don't feel that I need to. Nobody can
yeah,
make me remember anything, and nobody can make me imagine. So that tells me I am the sovereign, the totality of that mind. That's who I am. And then with the power, with being all the power, there's intuition, there's reason, and there's divine will. Well, if something arises in consciousness, let's say there's a trigger, there's somebody that is saying or doing something that would have triggered the self image of Amanda prior to self realization, it's come back in, then it's just to be intuitive. And I ask, do I want this experience? Thank you, no, thank you. And the thing falls away.
mm,
It doesn't come back. It doesn't keep coming back because, like I said, there's a perception of it, there's a memory of it, and then it all comes down to imagination. So I'm using the authority, being intuitive, reasoning, do I want this? No. And there's your divine will. You've just wiped that program away. There's no piles of karma or nothing. You've just dismantled it. So yeah, it's very powerful
yeah.
when you.
I love that. I really do. And one of the things that I am very interested also to hear also is just if I didn't know if there, and I don't want to assume if there was any kind of moment or an aha moment, so to speak, when you realized that you did want to work with people and share these things. Anything that you might speak of, just in terms of what that is, what that means to you and what that's been like for you.
Working with people
Right,
with
as far as sharing these things, yeah.
so it's quite a funny story. So when I had a mentor, she run something called a supported accommodation. So in the UK, to prevent homelessness, there are some landlords that are contracted by the local governments to provide housing and support. And because I'd ended up in one of those, in that position, I was a service user. Um, the lady who mentored me for 7 years, she trained me. She saw the gifts and the talents and she refined them. She said, "Oh, you're a dancer." So she got me back onto that. She got me a car and she'd done loads. She was fantastic. I say was, she still is. And then I eventually moved out of the supported accommodation and then effortlessly, I just became a support worker. And it was a very successful because I just kept getting people contacting me, offering me a lot of money to come and help them with their support. So I was kind of in demand. And then I said, "Oh, do you know what? I'm going to have a look at this, see what this is." Meeting with professionals, police officers, mental health practitioners, nurses. And it was a field of equality. And then I sat down and said, "How did that happen?" Because I know it wasn't a person, it was not the self image, it was not a separate sense of me. And I came up with a company and I said, "Right, I'm going to carry on doing this." So now I'm going in as a CEO and I've got people with mental health. And I said, "What do I want?" I want them to be free. I didn't know what that meant. I just saw them all happy. And
Yeah.
mark my words, last year they all, in 1 week, they said, "Amanda," and these were severe mental health challenges, schizophrenia, personality disorders, autism with learning difficulty, and personality disorders that were so complex. In a week, they said, "Amanda, thank you, we're well, we're going." And they just all left. And everybody left.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
I sat there. I said, "Oh, everybody's gone." And I just knew that, oh, everybody's okay. And I came home and I didn't have a clue what was going to happen. I was like, what's
Mm.
going to happen? And things just started to unfold. I started speaking with another being who she'd also had a conversation with David Bingham, Colette Whiteman. Colette and I become each other's mirror, iron sharpening iron. And while we
Yeah.
were doing the work, the universe was sending people to us. So that was how, bills, the need for paying bills and so forth. And of course, I've got my partner as well, and I've got family and support. And I still didn't know because I'd been through and I'd done a lot of work with mental health. And I know that some people in the spiritual community are challenged severely with the mind. It was so diverse. And I was like, I'm enjoying all of this. And then it just so happens that it's to teach the top, teach it from the top, go for the self inquiry, go for awareness, being aware of itself, and show people how to function from bliss and wisdom and how to unplug from the mind and use the mind to structure and organize. So it's integrating all of the koshas. But what was interesting last week, there was a spontaneous moment of doing toolboxes. So I've done some. It's just really a PDF with videos on that target a specific area, because even though this is spirituality, there is still the material world that we are part of.
Yeah.
And sometimes relationships get affected, finances get affected. And so with each area, it's exactly the same, one method, one solution, but it's targeting that area so that people can find peace with everything, with the whole of humanity.
Yeah, I really do. I deeply honor that and have so much respect for that and for what you are sharing with people. I am so incredibly grateful for everything that you have shared, and to meet me here in this space, and to actually speak about this. I think that's all the questions that have come up for me intuitively. I wanted to give you a little bit of space and time. There's no expectations on my part, but if there's any questions I haven't asked or anything that you're feeling moved to share, I just wanted to definitely give you some room to be able to do that.
Um, well, self-realization, I feel, it's the most easy. It's so simple. It is so simple. However, I think there does require a level of understanding about the mind. When we understand how that mind functions, because it's only our power that's coming back at us. It's the mind is our power. Um, and so that is the only thing that I would prompt people to go and investigate. Go and investigate that self image that's got a past and has got likes and dislikes. Just investigate it to realize that you are the attributeless, timeless, ever present, spacious, impersonal being. And there's the character, Amanda, that does like to eat pizza. That's fine. Amanda can eat her
Yeah.
pizza. You just remain ageless. You just remain timeless. You just remain, it's having that fortitude of knowing who and what we are. And however that is done, there's many ways that we can do that. I mean, I went to bed, I fell asleep and woke up as it so. It would be rude for me to say to do all these things because it, like you say, it's the dance. Maybe we
Yeah.
all, it's just life expressing. And I also want to mention that on Zoom, I don't know how it happens. My room zooms out and it comes back in, and it zooms back and it
That is
comes
so
back.
interesting because
I don't
I
know.
noticed that, and it was interesting to me because it almost feels, and there again, I don't want to get caught up. I know it'd be very tempting to get caught up in the mind with an explanation, but intuitively, what was coming through was that sometimes as you would be speaking, in terms of Christ consciousness
Yeah.
and what we actually are, sometimes it would zoom out, and then sometimes it was very interesting I
Yes.
find that it was very significant, and I'm totally okay with not knowing why.
Because when obviously, I mean, I've got a couple of devices, but I do tend to use the iPad.
Yeah,
Just because I'm working on my laptop and I've got files open and it can slow Zoom down. So when I have one-to-one conversations or if I'm doing group work, I'll say something and then the screen will go out. And it's always when
that's
I've said
so
something about
interesting.
consciousness. Yeah,
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 and what's
I'm
I
sure.
can tell you, I've done a lot of these. Not that it matters, but have been on many Zoom calls, for business related things. I've never seen this before, and so
Well, it,
when I noticed it, it feels very significant.
oh
Yeah,
wow. Because I know that these platforms are always uploading, they're always changing things and
yeah.
making changes. And then if you don't like the new change, then you go to your settings. But I've never seen anything to remove it. And it's not a problem either. So
Yeah, I thought
there
it
we
was
go.
absolutely beautiful. In fact, just as you said that, it kind of, yeah, it basically zoomed back out, and so to me it allowed me to have a greater view at
Yeah.
consciousness, and
Yeah.
it being as it is, and
Yeah.
that to me is no small thing. I really do. I honor that. I love that. And I want to thank you this morning too, because I want to
Thank
mention to
you.
you that to me, it is something that is really special to be able to sit in this space and have a conversation with someone. And I recognize that you are a human being. And I love how you said that about having likes and dislikes. And there are those things of being human. But I really got a very deep sense today that who I was sitting here with, and actually on some level there was no me sitting with you. That I got a sense that
Mm.
at a much greater level, that it was just consciousness itself, and that we
Yes.
were both in the same in the same place, so to speak. And so
Yes.
I really am very moved by that.
Yes, yes, we are the one field. I had the grandchildren a few days ago and they're both little and we was walking down the road and I looked at my granddaughter and I thought, is there a right and a left? I just lost all concept of right and left. And I
Yeah,
just stood there and I was like, oh, because of the identification of being consciousness. But of course, there is a hand that we call the right hand, and you just play the game, and the children feel it. Other beings do feel it. The animals come into the garden for healing. They demand healing.
yeah,
I've had animals come in with broken wings, and I live by a lot of fields, and so there are foxes and there are wild cats, but they don't come in the garden when the animals are there receiving their healing. But when they've had their healing, I see them walking around. So it's just an amazement. It really is. Yeah, it really is.
yeah. Oh my goodness, thank you so much. I really do.
Thank you.
I'm so incredibly appreciative of of you being here,
Thank
and
you.
and you being just, yeah, that's
Mm.
I'm very, very appreciative.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Jeff.
Yeah, and
Likewise.
I wanted to also, I would love to make it as easy as possible for people if they want to connect with you and learn more about you as well. So I'll get with you after I stop the recording, and I'm very glad to get as far as any information about you that I can actually add it to the notes of this, and so I can
Yeah.
actually include if there's a website address,
Yes, yes.
there's no expectation on my part. I just want to make it as easy as possible so that people can get in touch with you and connect with
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Certainly. Thanks again.
Thank you.